One of these things are true, but
Correct.
everything else is false.
That's correct. All right, here we go. Taylor Swift, you turned down the Super Bowl halftime show because the NFL wouldn't allow you to own your performance footage.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and my experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stage and television shows all over the world. Earlier this week, singer-songwriter superstar Taylor Swift made an appearance on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon to promote her new album. During the interview, she opened up about a lot of things, including her engagement to football legend Travis Kelce. And many of you asked me to take a look at this interview and break down her nonverbal communication. But the real surprise during the interview came when Fallon put her through a lie detector style game about rumors on the internet surrounding her. And Taylor Swift showed an incredible poker face. Can you spot the moments of deception? And what do her body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal about her engagement? Let's dive right in. Okay, so as you guys know, recently on the channel, we've been doing a lot of very serious, heavy topics. In fact, I think it's one of the longest stretches I've had in the history of the channel where I tackle things that are very adjacent to politics or crime or trials and a lot of heavy topics. So this week I wanted to do something a little more light, a little more fun, and a lot of you sent me this interview asking me to break down the nonverbal communication. So I decided to take a look at it, and there are some really, really great lessons here on body language, facial expressions, and word choice. But then I saw this part where Fallon played a game with Taylor Swift where he listed 5 rumors about her, and only one of them was true, and he tried to figure out which one.
One of these is true.
One of these things are true, but everything else is false.
That's correct. All right, here we go. Taylor Swift, you turned down the Super Bowl halftime show because the NFL wouldn't allow you to own your performance footage.
And we're going to talk a lot about deception overall and games of deception as well, and take a look at this amazing segment and see if you guys could figure out, based on what you're seeing, what's going on. So I'm really excited about that. But let's start from the top where they're talking about her recent engagement.
I look at it constantly. Like it doesn't feel in any way normal for me. I'm just sort of like, oh,
this is the moment
man. He's just my favorite person I've ever met. No offense to everyone else.
Yeah.
But the fact that this is the person that I get to hang out with every day forever is just like, that's the whole thing of it. You look at that and you're like, I get to hang out with him forever, and this represents that.
All right, so just in this first clip, we already have some really great little bursts of nonverbal communication, because Taylor Swift is a stage performer, and usually on stage you have to move big for the rows all the way in the back to see you. So she's developed this habit to use her hands a lot to speak, and they give away a lot about what's going on with her emotionally. So right in the beginning, when she's talking about the ring and being engaged, she says, it doesn't feel in any way normal to me. And we see 3 hand gestures that have universal meaning. So the orientation of the palms is not universal. Different cultures use different orientations to communicate. However, some gestures do have universal meaning, and one of them is the hands turning face up. Research has shown that pretty much everywhere in the world, when conversationally both hands or one hand goes palm up, it's very often either transactional or epistemic. So what transactional means is some kind of exchange. Either I'm asking for something or offering something. So wherever you're tuning in from in the world, if I do this gesture, most of you will understand that I'm either offering or asking for something. And this doesn't have to be a physical thing, right? It doesn't have to be like I'm asking for money. It could be, but it can also be that I'm offering you a welcome, or I'm asking you for forgiveness. So whenever we're exchanging something, whether it's physical or not, this is very common. The second category is epistemic, which means related to knowledge, or in this case, a lack of knowledge. So when the hands go up, it's often connected to not knowing or being confused or not having an answer, which is why we often see them combined with a shrug. Next up in her sequence, we go from the palm up to this gesture. And this, whether it's just one gesture like this or back and forth like this, is called oscillating. And the research shows that, once again, universally, this is a sign of negation. So especially when the palm is out like this, but sometimes the palm might be down like this as well, we're throwing away a gesture, we're negating something. So again, wherever you're tuning in from in the world, if I do something like this or like this, most of you understand that as being a refusal or a no, or like rejecting an idea. And then finally, we have her fingers coming inwards like this, which is called digital flexion, or simply fingers coming inwards. And this is a very good sign of either stress or defensiveness when the fingers come in. When we relax, the fingers relax as well. So we see this kind of thing. Not all the way, because all the way is also stress. So it's that happy medium, that's relaxation, and then either all the way out in this jolt or all the way in suggests some kind of tension or stress. So when we put it all together with what she's saying, it doesn't feel in any way normal. It actually makes perfect sense because there's this new information that's still confusing. It's new. So this is that epistemic gesture with the hand up. Then we have this throwaway because she's saying it doesn't feel normal. So it's almost like there's still a disconnect with this new chapter of her life, still having a hard time processing it. And then we get the fingers to come in like this, which suggests some kind of stress, anxiety, maybe excitement around this whole topic. So we see that not just in her words, but with her body language, she's expressing that this is all new. She still hasn't accepted it. And there's some kind of excitement, anxiety, butterflies around this entire concept. Okay, next up, we get a huge cluster of behaviors when she says the sentence, "This is the person that I get to hang out with every day forever," as she's talking about what this ring represents. Later in this video, we're going to talk about clusters of behavior and what they mean in an interrogation or interview room, but basically these are a bunch of gestures that happen all around the same thought or sentence. So first off, before she even says that sentence, her speech slows down. As she says, the fact that, and we see her eyes searching. They're looking for the next sentence.
Yeah. But the fact that this is the person that I get to hang out with every day forever is just like...
The next thing is we see her hands literally stop moving. Up until this moment, they were moving the entire time as she was talking, and immediately after, they're going to go right back to moving, but as she says that exact sentence, they just completely freeze. Next, we see her one shoulder, just her left shoulder, pop backwards like this, and at the exact same time, or almost at the exact same time, we see a rapid succession of blinks, and her head is very subtly shaking side to side like this. So it's almost as that shoulder's backing up, we see these quick blinks, and the head moving like this. So let's break these gestures down one at a time. When someone who's usually quite animated stops moving, it's a very good sign that their cognitive load is increased. Their brain is working overtime, so it stops worrying about movement. It's also a mechanism to call less attention to ourselves because we might need a minute. This increase in cognitive load is also very consistent with what we saw before the sentence, where her speech is slowing down, the fact that, and she's searching for the right words. So that's an increase in cognitive load. She's looking for the right way to express what she's feeling. It's also very consistent with a rapid increase in blinking like the one that we saw. So research shows that when we are processing information or even emotions, we see these little flutters of blinking, very consistent with processing. Try to understand something or try to express something. And finally, we have this no gesture, which according to me is the #1 most misunderstood gesture in all of body language. Very often I see in my comments people who say, "Oh, look, the person did this with their head, they're lying," because that's how you know when someone's lying. First of all, we'll get more into this later in this video, but there isn't a single gesture on the planet that would allow you to know that someone's being deceptive just by seeing that one gesture. It doesn't exist. And this very much applies to head shakes as well, because those can mean so many things. It can happen in disbelief, even if it's positive disbelief, like I might come back from a movie and go, "I can't believe how good this movie was." It can happen in disappointment or disapproval. It can happen in emphasis. I often see waiters get asked about something like, can I replace my salad with fries or something? And they might go, "Absolutely," with the head like this, meaning don't worry, it's not a problem at all. There's nothing to worry about. So this gesture can mean a lot of things. It can mean deception, but it's a safer assumption that it suggests some kind of inner conflict with an idea, whether it's good or bad. So when we put all of these gestures together, it suggests that there's some kind of conflict happening in this moment with what she just said. The idea that this is the person that I get to hang out with every day. Now, can this be that she's still in disbelief and taken aback by the idea that she gets to spend her life with this awesome guy? It could absolutely be that, especially because we just saw signs seconds before that she's still having some kind of struggle believing that all this is real, right? We saw that epistemic hand up, we saw that oscillation, so she's still having a hard time with this new idea, so this could very well be that she's still taken aback, having a hard time processing everything. Another possibility is that we saw her search for her words before she said this sentence, and then she said, "Get to hang out with him every day." But that's not literally true, right? They're both very busy people, so it's unlikely that they're gonna get to hang out every day. So it's possible that this processing and this little no and these gestures that we're seeing is her basically thinking, well, maybe not every day, but you get the point. You get what I'm trying to say. It could very well be that. So this is a perfect example of how in an interview room, I would see these behaviors and I know that there's something here that's causing her to slow down for a second, but I can't know what this is. These are just signals that allow me to know, okay, you have to ask a few more questions here. There's something going on. This is why we say that behavioral cues are behavioral clues. They don't give us the final answer, just a direction. There's some kind of thing happening here. It's increasing your cognitive load. What is it? What is causing this? Next up, we get a gesture that's a really great reminder of why baseline and context are very, very important. And it happens as she's talking about what the ring represents to her, and she says that that's the whole thing of it. So basically saying like, this is what this ring means to me. And as she's saying that, we see a head tilt like this. Now, research shows that normally, when we see a head tilt in an interaction, it denotes one of two things. The first is curiosity or skepticism. Like if I'm curious about something or looking at something skeptically, we see a head tilt. The second one is sympathy, whether I'm requesting sympathy or providing sympathy. Like you tell me a sad story and I go, oh, like this. So two very common places where we see a head tilt. So as you look at this moment, you might see a head tilt and go, what's going on here? Is it sympathy? Is it curiosity, skepticism? But when you remember baseline and context, it changes things. Because for Taylor Swift, this is in her baseline. Very often, especially in this interview, I've seen her do it before, but in this interview especially, she often emphasizes or ends a sentence with this sideways head tilt. And I think in this case, it might have something to do with the way she's sitting. So she's sitting down and Jimmy is to her left. And we're gonna see when her body is facing him that she leans in sometimes for emphasis. But in this case, I think, and other cases where she's turned a little bit more this way, she makes her points like this. So again, it's important to notice these things because otherwise we might look into why it's happening. But because she's doing it a lot at the end of a sentence here, we could just chalk it down to this is part of her baseline, which is behaviors that happen regularly, whether there's stress or not stress for this individual during this conversation.
That's the win, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you did his podcast, New Heights, which, by the way, I have done, and since I've done his podcast, they've won every game.
Yeah, you know what? Don't think I didn't notice that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so
I don't want to thank you. I don't want any credit. Let's just act like it didn't happen.
Let's not jinx anything.
All right, so that's just a really quick clip, and I just want to point out two things with that one. One of them is body language. So notice how when she says, don't think I didn't notice that, she moves closer to him with the whole body to emphasize that. So we're seeing here that she emphasizes with proximity by approaching the person, which if we go back and think about that head tilt, as she's saying, you know, that's the thing about this engagement ring, we could very much connect the two and see that she approaches for emphasis, whether it's this way or this way, more head on. The second thing is in what she's expressing here. So Jimmy Fallon has said that, you know, since he was on the podcast himself as a guest, Travis Kelce has only won in football. And notice how Taylor Swift goes, you know, don't think I didn't notice that. And that kind of implies a really sweet relationship where she very much cares about the things that Travis does. Because for her to know this, for her to have this information, she would have to know when Jimmy was on the podcast, of Travis and Jason Kelce's podcast, New Heights. But also, she would have to know exactly since that time how many games they've won and how many they've lost. So we know this. We know that she goes to a lot of games, but in the way that she responds here to where she immediately knows that and how they've been winning, and she even goes on to say, like, let's not jinx anything, it shows like personal care about the things that he's doing. Look, I am and will forever be very skeptical of celebrity relationships because when you have two people who not only probably enjoy the spotlight, but are used to the spotlight and they get together, it could sometimes create conflicts there. But it's nice to see that in this case when she's here talking about her new album, that's why she's here, and to talk about her engagement. You know, Jimmy Fallon was asking her about her ring and stuff. She takes these moments to even subtly acknowledge that she pays attention to what happens in Travis's life and in his career as well. Okay, now we're going to move on and talk about the actual engagement and the way it happened. And then we're going to move on to this deception game that they played where he tried to figure out which of the 5 facts were true, and we're going to see some amazing stuff there. But before we do it, do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and please take a second to like this video because it really does help with the growth of the channel.
after that podcast, I think I'm right about this, it might be another rumor about you, but he went and you got engaged right after the podcast.
Yes. So basically, I think for Travis, the podcast was just sort of like a distraction, sort of ruse to keep me not looking out the windows of the house. He's walking around sort of nervous about the podcast. He's like, my heart is racing. I know how much this means to you. Like, really want this to be what you hoped it would be, because we've been talking about doing the podcast and announcing the album.
Yeah.
And he's like, my heart's racing. And I've never seen this dude nervous, ever.
Of course he's not nervous about the podcast.
Professionally not a nervous person.
Okay, so a couple of things here, none of them having to do with body language. First and foremost, another important reminder as to why context is so important. So when we saw them on New Heights, on the podcast together, and we did an analysis on that interview here on the channel, there were some rumors at the time that he had proposed immediately after. Some of their circle, their family had kind of hinted at that, but it wasn't really confirmed at the time. But it could explain a lot of what we saw during the podcast. So here we hear her saying that she noticed how nervous he was, right? He was saying, I just really want this podcast to go the way you imagined it, and that she noticed those nerves. And I think the podcast was a really great cover for him, not just because it would keep her busy while they set up, but also it seems to have justified the nerves really adequately. So really great plan from Travis, because first it kept her busy, and second, it explained the nervousness that she noticed. But the other thing is this, it also gives us context, because when we analyze that video, and there are these moments where we're seeing spikes of stress, it's such a great reminder that we can never jump to conclusions. Yes, it's likely that if we establish a baseline for stress, and then a topic comes up, and all of a sudden we see all these behaviors happen at the same time, it's related to the conversation and that topic in that moment. But it can also be that something that she said reminded him of what's going on outside, and all of a sudden we see the stress. This is why we constantly say, when you see those clusters, you can't know for a fact that it indicates anything. It just allows you to know you need to ask more questions about what's going on here. It could be something, or it could be unrelated. This is also the reason that in interrogation or interview rooms, if we bring up a topic and we see a cluster, very often we let it go, we move on to something else, allow the behaviors to go back to baseline, then bring the topic up again and see if we see the same clusters, the same increase in cognitive load, the same stress. If it happens more than once around the same topic, that really increases the likelihood that it's related to that topic. So again, remember, these clusters are very good clues that something's going on, but we can never jump to conclusions as to exactly what's going on. Oh, one more thing with the clip we just saw, and this is body language, and it is important, but I can't really tell you why it's important yet, because it'll give something away. But notice how when he says that, this might be a rumor, he's not sure, and he's like, this could just be a rumor, the audience laughs, and she also laughs, she giggles, and she looks towards them. So where the laughter's coming from, she giggles, and then she turns back towards Jimmy. So just remember that that's what happens when this idea of a potential rumor is brought up. That's really important, but I can't quite tell you why yet. Okay, so Taylor Swift is a performer, and as a result, she's very expressive with her gestures. And when she communicates, they give a lot away. Like we just saw, she's talking about her engagement, and we're seeing those nerves, and we're seeing how the body language reflects that it's still new to her, and she's still coming to terms with it, and there's parts about it that still make her feel a little anxious and nervous. So we're seeing all this in the body language. But now they start playing this game of deception, where Jimmy Fallon is going to read off 5 internet rumors. Only one of these is true, and he's going to try to figure out which one it is based on maybe her reactions or just his gut feeling on the likelihood of these rumors. So I'm going to show you each of these rumors, and we'll see what the behaviors indicate and if you guys can guess what's what. But before we do, I want to answer a question that I get asked very often in the comments, and this is such a great opportunity to answer those questions. So I very often get asked in real life and on social media if my skill set, my experience, and what I've studied allow me to be like incredibly good at games of deception, whether it's things like poker or werewolf or something like this, 2 truths and a lie, where you have to figure out which one the lie is, which one the truth is, or whatever. And the way I answer it is that the edge that I have is similar to the edge that a pro athlete would have. So let's say like a pro football player would have playing a video game about football, like Madden NFL or something like that, to where their understanding of certain parts and aspects of the game will help, but ultimately the skill doesn't directly translate. And it's the same for me. And this is for a lot of different reasons. So for example, let's take a game like Two Truths and a Lie, where someone's telling two things that are true and one's a lie and you have to figure out which one. So first of all, when it's a game and we have permission to lie, we feel much less stressed about that lie, right? Because we're not detecting lies. There's no gesture in this world that allows you to know that someone's lying, because there's nothing that we all do when we're being deceptive. So what we're looking for is stress. By looking for stressful behaviors in clusters, you have to see a lot of them. So if we're playing a game and I'm allowed to lie to you and I'm trying to hide that lie to win this game, I feel much less guilt about that lie. So it's not likely that the stress is going to spike as much. Furthermore, the stress around the truth is a little bit increased because we're playing this game and I want to make sure you don't catch me. So it's like everything levels out. The lies are less stressful. The truths are a little more stressful. Everything is almost on that same level of stress. So yes, every now and then I might catch a little something that's a little different, like maybe the person's trying to sell this a little bit too much, or if I ask a question about one of the facts and they stumble in a way that you wouldn't if this was a real memory, and I see that in the way that they're recalling something might be different, I might catch these little things, but it's not like I'm going to win every single time. The other really big component to this is that even in interviews and interrogations where a lot of this stuff is applied, there's never an aha, I got you, that was a lie moment. We're never looking for that moment. When we see these clusters, we don't stop the game and say, okay, I think you're lying there. It gives us a little clue that something's going on, and we just dig a little deeper. And again, we talked about this numerous times in this video, sometimes that stress was because of something else, like the question triggered a different thought, and as we get in there, we go, okay, you know what, maybe that stress was unrelated. But sometimes we go in there and we find, okay, hold on, there's more stress around this and more stress around this until we eventually get a confession. That's the goal of what I do in corporate interviews and what a lot of my colleagues do in interrogation rooms. That confession, to get to see these behaviors and for them to open up and go, okay, here's what actually happened, or here's the truth of what's going on. And then finally, and I said this a few times, but I really want to drive it home, there's no such thing as deceptive behaviors. There's been tons of research done on this, and some research found that in this group of people, a lot of them did this thing when they were lying, and in this group, a lot of people did this thing when they're lying, but there isn't a single gesture on this planet that we all do when we're being deceptive. There are some gestures that happen more commonly in deception, but there's not one gesture that happens to every human being when they're lying. This is why we look for those clusters. We look for, of the family of gestures that are often associated to deception, 4 or 5 of them are happening at the same time here. That increases the odds of deception. And even at that, we're never certain. So when you put all this together, yes, when I play games of deception, and one of my favorites is Werewolf. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but basically you're trying to figure out who's being deceptive in the group. I have a bit of an edge. It's not a huge edge, but I will often see a little behavior or a little thing that's out of place or a cluster of behaviors, especially because in that game specifically, you get to ask questions and they get to defend their position. So there's a lot more interaction happening, a lot more opportunity to see these things in a context and compared to the previous round when the person was being honest. So there's a lot more clues there, and my friends get very annoyed playing with me. In fact, in certain groups of friends, I'm not allowed to play. But when it comes to things like Two Truths and a Lie, for example, that's very different because you don't really have that opportunity to ask questions. And if you see some behaviors, who knows why they're there, right? Maybe a truthful story was a little embarrassing for the person, and that's why you're seeing some stressful behaviors. So because you can't go in and ask these questions and figure out what's going on, it becomes much more difficult. Okay, but with all that said, let's look at this game right now. So Jimmy Fallon is making 5 statements. Each one is a rumor, and one of these is true. So even if it's really difficult and challenging, and the gift of hindsight allows us to go back and go, oh, okay, that's what that was. Whereas in the moment, we're not really sure what to pay more attention to, because I'd love to ask some questions for pretty much each one of these. But let's just look at it and try to see what your gut says if you're noticing something that seems important to you. So let's start with the first rumor.
Taylor Swift, you turned down the Super Bowl halftime show because the NFL wouldn't allow you to own your performance footage.
Okay, so that's the first rumor, that she turned down the NFL halftime show because they wouldn't allow her to hold on to her footage. So you could just look at her reaction to that and just try to get a sense of whether you feel that that is a truthful statement or a rumor.
Rumor 2. Your close friend, Ed Sheeran, learned about your engagement like everyone else did on Instagram. That would be great if that's true.
All right, number 2 is that her friend Ed Sheeran learned about the engagement online with everyone else, that she didn't call him or notify him. He learned with the rest of us.
Rumor 3. In your speech at Selena Gomez's wedding, you joked that Selena beat you to the altar. That's funny, I think, and I know you're funny. I could see that happening.
Okay, that's the 3rd one, about how at her speech at Selena Gomez's wedding, she said that Selena beat her to the altar. So again, look at that. What's the sense that you're getting?
Rumor 4, you've been spotted walking a mystery dog in Florida. This is true. This is on the internet. And it's a mystery dog. And by the way, I think that might be the true one, but who knows?
That's number 4, about a mystery dog. And finally, here's the last one.
But who knows? Travis Kelce can be heard harmonizing on Opalite. All right, I said 5 rumors about.
And that's the last one, about Travis Kelce having harmonized on her song Opalite. So go back and look at them again if you want to, and try to figure out which of these 5 is true. And you can use just the logic of what he's saying. You can look at a reaction. You can look at a mix of things. But let's try to stick to behaviors mostly to try to figure out which one of these is true. Okay, before I reveal which of these 5 is the actual true one, let me walk you a little bit through my process that made me notice a couple of things and at the very least eliminate a few of these. So first and foremost, very important to note, Taylor Swift has a pretty darn good poker face, because the way she reacted to all of these were variations of one another, and there wasn't one that really stood out from the rest. In all of these, except for the last one, she giggled when she heard the rumor, almost immediately. On some of these, she licked her lips. On 3 of them, she licked her lips immediately after having heard it. And also on 3 of these, not the same 3, there's some overlap, but on 3 of these, she looked at the audience while they were laughing as well. But the challenge with noticing these things is that we don't know the baseline. We don't know which of these is true, so we have nothing to compare to. So does she look at the audience more likely when she's telling the truth or when she's being deceptive? We don't really know. We haven't had an opportunity to observe and see these behaviors. So we can only make guesses based on likelihood. So the first one that I eliminated and felt was an actual rumor, that it wasn't true, with moderate confidence, was actually the first one that Jimmy Fallon guessed was truthful. And he was wrong, but he's going at this differently. He's going at this based on the likelihood of the story. And it was the one about Selena Gomez's wedding. And the reason I eliminated that was twofold. One, as she was laughing on that one, that was one of the ones where she looked towards the audience. And I remember that earlier when he brought up the rumor of the engagement, maybe there's a rumor, they laughed and she looked at them. And this was just an educated guess, but I felt that with the rumors, it's probably more likely that she would look at the audience to see, like, okay, are they buying this thing that's not true? Whereas with the truth one, which is ultimately the one we're looking for, she might make a little less eye contact to not give away that that's the answer, that's the one. It's almost ironic how, in this case, since we're looking for the truthful one, that's likely to be a little more stressful. But the second, and I would say bigger reason I eliminated the Selena Gomez one is because it's not a good look for Taylor Swift. If it ends up being true that during Selena Gomez's speech, she was like, well, you beat me to the altar, and kind of felt sour about that, it's not a good look. She's here promoting her new album. It's supposed to be positive. The network wants to show her under a good light. That's not the one that they would go with. The second one that I eliminated with not so high confidence was the last one. Because when he said that Travis harmonized on Opalite, we saw her eyes open up like this, which is often consistent with surprise, almost like, okay, she hadn't really heard that one yet. And she almost got ready to say something. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something. The reason my confidence was very low is because this was the last one. So maybe she's getting ready to talk about the game or something. So again, there's a lot of stuff that really throws some wrenches into the wheels here. So those were the 2 that I felt, those are probably rumors. That's where I was leaning. But let me know in the comments before I say the answer what you think. And it could be like, I think this is the truthful one. It could be, I'm not feeling this one or that one, or I think one of these 2 or one of these 3 is the truthful one. What are you leaning towards and why? Please try to do this honestly. Let me know in the comments before you get to the answer, because obviously we can all just watch the video and then say, oh, I totally got it, but that doesn't really help me in any way. So the one that was correct was the Ed Sheeran one, that he found out at the same time as everyone else. Now, I know there's quite a few viewers who got that right. Some of you maybe noticed something behaviorally, and if you did, that's awesome. Some of you just based on a hunch, felt like that one could be the truthful one, and some based on just pure guessing. Keep in mind that if we all just guessed, just randomly picked one, 20% of people would get it right because you have a 1 out of 5 chance. So depending on how well this video does, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people would get this right if they just guessed. So let's try to avoid comments like, oh my God, it's totally obvious. I knew it right away, because I'm telling you, behaviorally, it's not that obvious. But if we go back and look at it, there are a couple of subtle clues that make sense now that we have that information. But we had nothing to compare to originally, so it's not like a dead giveaway. For one thing, if you look at the way she laughs at that specific one, of all the laughters, it's the most forced one.
On Instagram. That would be great if that's true.
Because the other ones have this kind of subtle giggle. It's an actual reaction. This one is more of a, I'm going to make sure to laugh so they see me laughing at this. So we get more of this like this, and there's more movement to it, and she moves forward with it. So in hindsight, we can look at that and go, okay, that's her trying to sell this giggle. But originally, when we first saw it, it's not important enough for us to be like, oh my God, that's definitely the one that's truthful. Look at how forced that laughter is. Could give you a bit of a hunch, but it's not enough. Second, and this is big, it's the only one of the 5 where as she laughed or after she laughed, her chin came inwards like this. And blocking the wrists, the main organs, and the neck are very consistent with stress, nervousness, self-awareness, and becoming protective. So it could give us a clue that she's nervous about that answer. And again, even if it's a truthful one, he's looking for the truthful one. So it could be that this guarding is her like, I hope they don't see that this is the correct answer. Third, this could be interesting, but it's a little bit all over the place. It's one of 2 answers where she didn't look at the crowd while they were laughing. And if you remember earlier, we saw that when he brought up the idea of rumors, when it came to the engagement, the crowd was laughing and she looked at them. So maybe this is some kind of perception management, like connecting with them over these things that aren't true. All I know is that in this one, on 3 of them, she looked at the audience, but on the first 2, the one about turning down the NFL and the Ed Sheeran one, which was the actual answer, she did not look at the audience. And again, along with that tucking of the chin, these could be attempts at her not calling attention to herself so nobody will catch that this is the correct answer. So these are all things where, again, hindsight is 20/20. We could look back and go, oh, okay, that's why these things happened. And they're subtle, but they are different from the other answers. But in real time, who knows? Like, maybe that would be really embarrassing, right? If her friend Ed Sheeran found out with everyone else online, that'd be really embarrassing. And as she thinks about how that would play out, she's feeling a little embarrassed about that. Also, keep in mind, some of these other things might have elements of truth to them. Like, for example, the turning down the NFL one. She will not be performing at the halftime show at the NFL. Who knows what the conversations were there? Maybe there are some elements of that are true, but the whole thing overall, the reason for it might be a rumor. So maybe there are certain things about that one that make her a little nervous because she behaves very similar on the first 2. There isn't too much movement. She keeps to herself. We see her licking her lips. They're very similar. So again, there's a lot of nuance. Oh, another thing, really, really important. When he first brings up Ed Sheeran for the second one, he says Ed Sheeran, she kind of nods her head and kind of laughs a little. She smiles a little bit like this. And some people might be tempted to believe that, oh, well, that's the one. That's the giveaway, right? It's the one with Ed Sheeran and she smiled. But from the way they're doing this, it seems like she hasn't seen what the 5 rumors are before. That's the way it seems. Maybe she did. So if she knew the questions, then yeah, you can look at it and go, okay, she's smiling because she heard Ed Sheeran and she's like, okay, here we go. It's the Ed Sheeran one. That's the truthful one. So she's kind of getting ready for it. But if she didn't know the questions, and that's what they're trying to represent here, then she's just reacting to Ed Sheeran, then she hears the rumor, and then she closes up a little bit, which would make a lot of sense. So all this to say, again, it's very difficult in these games where it's just reaction-based, and she has permission to lie, and we're trying to guess. So we might see stress in different places because this might have a bit of truth to it, and then this is playful, so we may not see as much nerves there. It's all very difficult. And I think the main takeaway, and I hope that anyone who watched this video leaves with this, food for thought, is that there are a lot of sources out there, whether it's TV shows or movies or articles online, that really seem to push the narrative that there are conclusive behaviors that allow you to know someone's lying, whether it's a shaking of the head like this or the eyes looking off in a certain direction. If those behaviors existed, interrogations and trials would last seconds, minutes, not days, not weeks. So those behaviors do not exist. We study behaviors that indicate a likelihood, a higher likelihood of deception, but we want to see those clusters and we want to ask those questions, not jump to conclusions. So let me know in the comments what you thought of all this, what you felt about those answers, what you think of those behaviors. And also I'd be curious to know, before watching this video, especially if you're new here, were there some behaviors that you thought, based on whatever source, meant deception? And did this video help you understand a little bit more that it's really not that simple and it's really not that conclusive? Let me know in the comments and I'll see you on the next one.